Mr. President, it's that time of week again, a time when I get to recognize a special person from a special place, the great state of Alaska, in what we call our Alaskan of the Week. And it's one of the best times of the week for me because I get to talk about the Alaska community, individuals, the pages. I think we have new pages here, but they unanimously agree every year that this is the most exciting speech of the week. I won't disappoint because you get to learn about Alaska, get to learn about what people are doing in Alaska, whether it's summer right now or winter. And so I'm going to recognize today, Mr. President, Mr. Aves Thompson, one of the many people in my state who has worked diligently to ensure that Alaska runs well, that goods get properly transported from one place in Alaska to another place, and we are a big state, that the systems that make a functional state, a functional society, on delivering things are in working order in Alaska. Now, I'll get to what Aves has done for a minute here, talking about him, but what I always like to do is talk a little bit about what's going on in Alaska right now. The weather is gorgeous. The fishing is great. A couple of weeks ago, I was up on the mighty Yukon River, way up north with my wife and 3 daughters and a bunch of family members fishing for one of the most iconic fish on the planet, the Yukon River King. And it's a time of festivals and parades all across the state. Last weekend, I was in Eagle River, about 15 minutes north of Anchorage, for the Bear Paw Festival, where, among other things, many Alaskans, myself included, partook in the Slippery Salmon Olympics. Now, I'm not going to describe exactly what happened, but as you can imagine, it involved running and obstacles with salmon. It was a lot of fun. So it's a great time to be in Alaska, so I encourage everybody watching on TV to come on up. You will love it. I guarantee it'll be the trip of a lifetime. But as you know, events like these reflect something larger about a place. They reflect ties and commitment and, importantly, people and community. They reflect people helping each other and spending their lives working to make things better. So, Mr. President, let me introduce you to Aves Thompson, our Alaskan of the Week, someone who has definitely spent his life making Alaska better and, more fundamentally, making Alaska work well and efficiently. Now, I will admit it, Alaska is not the easiest place to live. For one, it's really far away from the rest of the lower 48. I'm going to get on a plane. I try to get home every weekend. So I'll go home tomorrow afternoon. It'll be about 11 and a half hours door to door one way to get to my home in Anchorage. So that's pretty far. The winter weather, of course, can be brutal. Our mountains and our tundra are beautiful, but it can be challenging, to say the least, to build on that terrain. And getting goods in and out of Alaska is particularly vexing in a state the size of Alaska. Now, my colleagues from Texas don't always like to hear about it, but I like to say if you split Alaska in half, then Texas would be the 3rd largest state in the country because we are 2.5 times size of the state of Texas. But more than that, Mr. President, we are a continental, wide, expansive state. When you look at communities like Ketchikan down in southeast, communities like Barrow in the north, and all the way out west to the end of the Aleutian Island chain, you literally cover Florida, North Dakota, San Francisco. That's the size of Alaska. So it's a challenge to move things. Aves Thompson is currently the head of the Alaska Trucking Association and has spent his entire career working to make sure that Alaskans get the goods that they need, not only to survive, but to thrive. He's also worked to ensure that the goods are measured properly and that people aren't overpaying for them. This is very important. Now, Aves and his wife, Phyllis, came to Alaska in 1970, first to visit friends, then to build a life. They loved the state, they loved the weather, they loved the people, they loved the community. Phyllis taught elementary school, and eventually Aves worked for a small trucking company then worked for the state, first as a division director of the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Program, and then as the director and the chief of the Alaska State Division of Measurement Standards. Now that's a mouthful, but it's a really important job. What does it mean? It means that he was in charge of all the scales in Alaska. Everything from the scales to weigh your fruit at the grocery store, your gas at the pump, to the scales that weigh huge shipments of goods coming into our state. When she was a little girl, Aves' daughter, Kristen, remembers how her father used to always check the scales at the grocery store. So she told her friends that her father weighed cheese for a living. That's a family joke. He weighed cheese for a living. Aves became chairman of the 3,500-member National Conference on Weights and Measures, and he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award for his work, particularly around his work in setting the standards for international weights and measurements, which is incredibly important for the global economy, much of which runs through Alaska. In 2006, Aves became head of the Alaska Trucking Association. Why? Well, his daughter said he wasn't a trucker himself, but he was always one at heart. He loves the music, Waylon Jennings, Kenny Rogers. He loves the culture. And most of all, he loves the truckers themselves. Great, hard-working Americans who drive our trucks. The thing I like most about this industry is that it's made up of hard-working, tough people who want to make a living, Aves said. We're not looking for a handout. We're looking to pay our fair share. Our drivers work hard. They make a good living throughout Alaska. His daughter, Kristen, said that as she was growing up, a trucker was always calling and he was always offering help. Mr. President, let me tell you a little bit about the trucking industry in Alaska. Trucking employs over 13,700 people in Alaska, almost 1 out of every 19 workers. They're good-paying jobs with benefits, and they're sorely needed in my state. And with the exception of communities in southeast Alaska, almost everything that we get in Alaska comes into the Port of Alaska and is delivered by truck. And the rides themselves are unlike any rides in the country. We actually had a reality show, one of the first of many Alaska reality shows, called Ice Road Truckers. These were the guys, the men and the women who drove the haul road, as we call it. I was just on it going up to our fish camp on the Yukon. But they drive these trucks hundreds of miles up the haul road to Prudhoe Bay in the winter on ice. That show ran for 10 years. Americans loved it. Those were our truckers. As Aves puts it, in Alaska, if you got it, a truck brought it. It's absolutely essential to our economy. If trucking in Alaska stopped, the entire Alaskan economy would stop. Now, Mr. President, Aves is going to be retiring from the Alaska Trucking Association at the end of this month. But he sits on so many other boards and associations. He's involved in so many other elements of his community, his state, his country, that I guarantee you there's not going to be much time for him to rest during his well-deserved retirement. He's the kind of guy, and we all know him, when people call on him to do things, he gets things done. But one project he is passionate about, as am I, and is still ongoing, he's still leading on it, and he's absolutely determined to finish. Let me explain what this is, Mr. President. Like so many Alaskans, Aves is a veteran. I like to brag about Alaska. We have more veterans per capita than any state in the United States of America. He's one of them. He served in the Army from 1964 to 66 in the 2nd Infantry Division. He was stationed at the DMZ in Korea. Like so many of our veterans in America and Alaska, these experiences never left him. In 2002, he read about a 2nd Infantry Division reunion, and he thought he'd go. He found kinship among his fellow veterans and got talked into becoming an officer, eventually becoming the chair of the 2nd Indian Head Division Association and chair of the association's Memorial Foundation Board of Trustees. As I said, this guy is a doer and a leader. Among other things, he's led and raised money for 2 trips for veterans from the Korean conflict and who have served in Korea to go to Korea. And he's been working diligently to update the U.S. Army 2nd Division Memorial, which is located here at 17th and Constitution in Washington, D.C. The memorial was first erected in 1936 to honor the 2nd Division fallen soldiers in World War I. It was then modified to honor the 2nd Division fallen soldiers in both World War II and Korea. This is a very highly decorated Army division. Aves and other veterans of the 2nd Division thought that the memorial should be expanded even further to honor even more of the members of the 2nd Division who have lost their lives, and to leave space for future modifications of this important memorial for soldiers from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like so much of what happens here, none of this was easy. When he first started to work on the memorial, he went to the Park Service, which gave him a firm no. We're not going to help you. We're not going to let you move it. We're not going to let you expand it. Eventually, he came to us, his congressional delegation from Alaska, and we gave him a firm yes, we will help. We were able last year to include a provision in the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act to allow for the expansion of the 2nd Division, Infantry Division Memorial. Aves has been working hard at this ever since, working with agencies, raising private money for this memorial, and getting design approval. Mr. President, Aves has been married to Phyllis for almost 51 years. Kristen is a wonderful daughter who has 2 sons of her own. Aves is proud of his grandsons, Logan and Aaron Michael, and we are all very grateful for his work on the economy of Alaska, on the logistics, on the supply, on his work for veterans. Someone who cares so much, so deeply about his state, about his community, about his industry, about his country. So Aves, happy retirement, although we know you're going to continue to work hard. Thanks for all you've done for Alaska, for America, and thank you for being our Alaskan of the Week.